Ladies and gentlemen, the home for education, innovation, and collaboration. Welcome to the iLab.
And welcome everybody to the iLab. So actually, we're in a new location this time. Normally, we've been doing this from Beale Air Force Base, but since the last episode, I've actually PCS, so I've moved, and I'm now at Edwards Air Force Base, and I'm sitting here with Brigadier General Teichert, the commander of the 412th Test Wing here at Edwards Air Force Base. How are you doing, sir?
Chief, I'm doing great. First of all, to everyone that's listening, I am absolutely thrilled that Chief Eishen is now my primary wingman. He is a great leader. He cares genuinely for airmen and their families. He's innovative-minded, and I'll tell you, he shows up here with a ton of connections into the world and the culture of innovation that we need to take the next step of our journey here at the Center of the Aerospace Testing Universe.
I appreciate it, sir.
You got it.
Today, we're going to talk about a trip we did back in May.
Okay.
So when I first joined the wing, you said you wanted to take a trip down to Silicon Valley. You didn't really have a list of companies you wanted to see, but you had an agenda or a reason for going down there. So first I want to ask, what was the reason for us to plan that?
Yeah, absolutely. Chief, first of all, thank you so much for helping plan that trip. Those connections that you had from Beale paid massive dividends during our day and a half there, boots on the ground in the Silicon Valley area. Two primary reasons why I wanted us to go. And it wasn't just you and I, as you remember, but we brought a couple of other airmen that were innovation-minded that we wanted to also give the opportunity and the experience that we got there, boots on the ground, there amongst a culture of innovation. Two primary reasons I wanted to go. The first one was to find opportunities to collaborate so that we could get to know some of the players. We didn't obviously get to know all of them, but we had a pretty good subset, and I wanted them to get to know us and for us to find ways that we could actively and productively collaborate on opportunities for innovation and to move the mission forward. The second opportunity, or the reason that I wanted to go, was to provide us the context of seeing some of these cutting-edge organizations in their element so that we could take away some processes, practices, or mindsets from them to apply actively back here at Edwards.
Okay. Did we do that?
I think we did.
Okay.
I think there's some innovation collaborations that we've already started working on that maybe we'll talk about later. Those excite me, and I think it's probably just the tip of the iceberg. I
think so too. So I guess we'll start, like you said, we'll start chronologically. The first place we went was a Defense Innovation Unit, also known, it used to be known as DIUX. Now it's DIU. They've since dropped the X. And first, I wanted to get your initial impressions of the organization and any takeaways you might have had.
So, Chief, one of the things that I took away was that they already have a decent military presence and flight test presence there at DIUX or DIU. It was comforting to me that they, as an organization, realized that people who come from a background like we're a part of here at Edwards are valuable to that perspective there at DIU. The other thing that really struck me was that we already have some collaborations that we're actively working with them. Through the Emerging Technology CTF, we're working on products and test and evaluation processes for autonomy or artificial intelligence or small unmanned aerial systems. And those are things that they're working on there at DIU, and we already have some inroads by the nature of our work here and their work there to find additional ways to collaborate with them. And that was comforting to me that we were already tied in both by their workforce and by our mission set with them in some way.
With ACC and the entire Air Force in general, everybody's talking innovation and problem solving, and you also hear the word mission acceleration. So I got to Edwards and saw TEST. I had no idea what TEST was. Test and evaluation, T&E meant nothing to me. I could guess, but I would probably have guessed wrong. And as I've gone through it and learned more and more about just really test in general through the entire test center, is that it's a structured way to do and scientific method to do innovation. It is really what it is. We've taken the scientific method, we test a hypothesis, we do it in often a very dangerous environment, so there's also a huge focus on mitigation of risk. But by mitigating risk, by building a test structure, so we only test one thing, much like any sort of scientific experiment, we ensure that we can do some of the most really dangerous things in the Air Force in a safe environment, know the result, and then provide that output, whether it's a lesson learned because of it's a failure or a success of that weapon system. That brings in it fits in really nicely with innovation. Is that something Am I tracking that right?
No, I think you're tracking perfectly, Chief. I see test and evaluation as the opportunity to mold and shape the future in a way that is timely and accurate and operationally relevant. And we often think about what we do out on the flight line in the labs as test and evaluation. It is, but there's no reason why all of the different subsets of career fields that make this base run and this mission go can't be part of the mindset that is molding and shaping the future in a way that is timely and accurate and operationally relevant.
I think it's structured problem solving.
It is. It's exactly right.
But a structure that the Air Force understands, that the military understands, and is actually approved. It also has a nice caveat that it fits in nicely with the acquisitions process, which is always, if you talk to anybody in the innovation world or in the problem solving world, a lack of understanding of acquisitions or a lack of understanding of the test side causes a lot of problems. And so being able to merge those two and understand both at the same time, or at least speak a language that generals and general officers and leadership across the Air Force is already speaking, I think is helpful.
No, I think so too, Chief. And my boss, Major General Lozano, the commander of the Air Force Test Center, talks about how we, at our core in test and evaluation, embody 3 enduring principles. A relentless focus on the warfighter, adaptable test solutions, and world-class risk management. Nothing in there says that we're flying. Nothing in there says space or air or cyber. I think it's a mindset that's at our core as testers that can be applied in any domain, anywhere, at any time.
I think so. We just got done talking to medical. We were talking to security forces earlier this week, doing the exact same thing. So those units, enlisted members, very big enlisted presence in those units, and they're running their own tests and evaluation for various different tools and processes and organizational constructs that they'll either fail and then we'll spread those lessons learned, or they'll succeed and we'll also spread that as well. So it makes a lot more sense why you said, hey, when I got to DIU, or when you got there, you were excited to see a tester, somebody who understood that test process.
Yep, and not just one, but multiple testers. Yep. And I think at our core, what we do here is innovative by our nature, and we've been doing that here since 1942. But I want to make sure that every airman, regardless of their career field, senses their responsibility and opportunity to be a part of testing and evaluating, or said another way, molding and shaping the future.
Okay. So now if we get back into more of the DIU side, so we met with a lot of the leadership there. We discussed some of their ongoing projects. One of the coolest things I saw is I've been to DIU, I think that was my 6th time. They'll talk to you about they were in a 1.0 and a 2.0, and really it's every organization I think seems to start the same. They start and they buy a bunch of cool stuff and they meet a bunch of cool people, and then they try to figure out what their mission is. They have an end mission maybe in sight, but they don't know what the steps are in between. And much like AFWERX is doing the same thing, it takes some weaving around the ecosystem to figure out exactly where they should go and what works for them. DIU and both DIU and AFWERX have had some failures, and they'll readily admit to it, but they know they knew that going in. And so now they're at a point, instead of searching for every technology, they can actually get very structured in their portfolios. And I think that's one of the biggest things I took away is they could do everything. They're a joint organization. They were built by the Secretary of Defense at the time. And so they could go in any different direction, but they instead looked at what does the warfighter need in all services. They wanted to focus on, they've learned instead of focusing on maybe just Air Force or just Navy, they want to only pursue things that are going to have a wide reach. So if the Air Force decides they're not ready for this technology, both the Navy and the Army can also use it. And then they let kind of their projects and their problems drive their portfolio. Instead of us coming in and saying, sir, I want to build an innovation organization for you, and I think AI should be in there, and I also think 3D printing should be in there, and I'm just making those things up. Instead, they said, here are the problems that we have across the services. Here's where I think we can build some projects. And then they built a portfolio to match actual problems rather than vice versa.
And Chief, I'm glad that they're there. The one thing that I took away, one comment that a gentleman said during our trip was that China and Russia have a bigger presence there in Silicon Valley than the DoD.
That's true.
That should be motivation to all Americans, certainly all airmen, that there's some collaborative relationships that we need to start building now with some of those centers of excellence in industry around our country, because our adversaries recognize that there's a lot to be gained by being at places like Silicon Valley. And if we don't start harnessing those capabilities, then we're at risk of getting behind.
Well, I think not just there, but the entire California ecosystem. I mean, between SoCal and NorCal, and this is one of the coolest things about Stanford, I think, is you've got a school, and then right outside, if you have a great idea within that campus, right outside the gates, you have patent offices, lawyers, venture capital firms, and all the mentors and the coaches you need to bring that idea to fruition. You're seeing that in the SoCal area, especially when we bring up space and aerospace, the Antelope Valley in and of itself. And so California seems to be growing into this really, it's been tech for a while, but this really entrepreneurial ecosystem, and it just depends on what your focus is. If it's software mainly, it's NorCal over maybe in the Bay Area. You're looking more at the hardware aspect, again, especially space and aerospace. We're looking down south in SoCal. And so all the right people are around. So I think networking with those mentors and trying to link up to figure out what the state of the art is or the realm of the possible has been huge. So
yeah, Chief, we're 6 hours from everywhere.
Yep.
In the technology and innovation realm. You think about 5 hours from Stanford, 5.5 hours from Berkeley. We're a couple hours over the hill to downtown LA and UCLA and USC. We're 3 hours from Vegas and AFWorks. We've got a lot right here in the local area, a day's driving distance. And if we don't start harnessing some of these relationships and capabilities and opportunities and centers of excellence outside of ours, then we're going to get behind. But I think right now we're on the tip of a resurgence here and around the DoD just because we're making inroads into these places that have been non-traditional for the DoD in the past.
No, I think you're right. And I mean, DIU's nice because they're already there. They're kind of a pathfinder for us. You can ask them, hey, I've got an idea in this realm, and they can, link you up with 5 different companies that they've already at least looked at or talked to in that world. One thing I wanted to switch over to, because I thought it was really cool that we went to go see them, was the Google X team. For those of you who don't know, Google X is kind of we could call it the innovation lab of Google. Everybody thinks of Google as an entire group of forward thinkers and problem solvers, but there's a team even within that massive team at Google that's job is to think really big. And it was interesting to see kind of their idea of how they separate a problem from a normal Google problem to a Google X problem. And so I wrote that down, but their big focus was Google X itself. They focus on addressing huge problems, not anything, you might call them Horizon 3 problems, but these really big things that there's no answer for. It had to have a really big problem. It had to have step 2 for that was a radical solution, something just, again, really weird and out there that they wouldn't have been able to figure out in any other ecosystem. And then it had to use breakthrough tech. What were some of the big takeaways for you with Google X and their team?
So the first thing walking in the door, I kind of laughed to myself about Google X because to me it's a little bit like innovation squared. Google already as a culture and as a climate is very innovative, certainly as compared to a behemoth like the DoD and the United States Air Force. But then you take a look at a subset of that innovative organization that really is looking to push the boundaries and the envelope of what they do and the type of benefits that they can bring to the consumer. A couple thoughts. The first one is something that the individual we talked to told us, which is if you're in Google X and you shut down your own project or program because you realize that you're going down a dead end, you get a bonus and a vacation paid for by the company. Now, that's just a reminder to me as we think about pursuing things that are radical and innovative, that it means that we're going to fall short. And that is a benefit because it means that you're pushing the horizon, the envelope enough that failure is a possibility. And it's certainly a reminder to me as we look through, especially some of those Horizon 3 problems that maybe we could tackle here, that it's okay if an airman tries something and they fall short. In fact, we should not just recognize that, but we should reward that. And in fact, just going up to the tower and giving the Grit Award about a week ago to a young airman that had an idea, that faced some barriers, faced some challenges, and continues to pursue what he thinks is the right answer is a reminder to me of an example of what we saw there at Google X.
No, I think it keeps you from that. There's that sunken cost fallacy. We've been working on this thing for 3 years.
Yep.
We've spent a lot of time. The guys before us had to know what they were doing. That's why they picked it. And they probably did know what they were doing. It's just the environment was different at the time. They made the best decision based on the information they had. However, the world's changed. Dynamics have changed. And throwing good money after bad or good manpower and time after bad isn't always worthwhile. And so all of those things should be constantly reevaluated, re-looked at to see if they're still what we need to do. And if they really still are and it's worth spending that time, then we do. But just because we put money and time into it in the past doesn't mean we should continue. So not only is it expected, but celebrated when somebody says, you know what, this was my idea, it was a passion of mine, but we're not there. Either the tech's not ready, the solution's not where it needs to be, or maybe I really don't understand the problem. So I thought that was a really interesting thing that they celebrated there.
Yep. Nope, they certainly did. They also have their own variety of test and evaluation. We talked about that a little bit while we were there. They don't have an independent organization that does test and evaluation like we do in the United States Air Force, but they made a very clear point that as soon as they can, they try to get a subset of their product either out to real customers out in the field or customers that are within the Google empire so that they can get real customer feedback on the things that we're working on or they're working on to try to see if they're good fits and what changes they need to make. And so while not independent test and evaluation, they really seemed in those ways to apply the same principles that we apply here.
That adds the user-centered design focus or the design thinking focus that the first thing they're going to do is not going to work probably. So they have to get it in front of experts, users and stakeholders as early as possible, and then iterate, knowing that we're going to iterate a lot. Hopefully we are pretty good by the time we get it out, but if we can get out the cheapest, lowest level version, lowest tech version possible, and then see is customer behavior, in their eyes customer behavior, maybe for us that's airman behavior or other military members or the public, is that what we thought was going to happen? Again, our hypothesis. And if it's not, no big deal. We'll iterate, and we'll try it again, and we'll keep doing it until we get what we want right. And then we continue doing it. The other thing I liked is they don't release something to the field, whether that be hardware or software, and just step back and go, my work is done. Because they have to constantly iterate. For us, the mission's always changing. For them, the customer's changing, the archetypes that they're dealing with are changing. And so maybe kids use a tool different than adults. For us, maybe it's one AFSC uses our solution different from another AFSC, being, say, Air Combat Command as opposed to Air Mobility Command. And so knowing our different customers and what they're going to use it for, the different warfighters that we're supporting, the different environments maybe that they're using the tech or the capability in, and then going, okay, what we thought we needed is wrong. We'll tweak it and change it.
Yeah, and the DoD, certainly in the Air Force, we tend to gold plate our products before we deliver them to the customer. And that's been our traditional model where the acquisition process starts and it takes a long, long time before we get a product out the door because we want that product to be spot on. By the way, I want our products to be spot on, but there is a benefit of that model that they use at Google X of getting something that is useful to the field and learning from it. And as I hear people like Dr. Roper or General Holmes talk about the Century series of fighters and going back to a mindset of more production, quicker cycles, getting things that are useful out to the field, I think we're learning some of those lessons that maybe Google X learned a long time ago.
I think one of the differences with what we do and what the military does in general is a lot of the work that we're doing, prevents a catastrophic loss of life. And so we have to differentiate that. There are things that we cannot fail on, and those have to be ready to go from day one. But there are tons of others that just change the nuances of how something may work or its actual abilities. And so those are ones where we have room, we'll say, to experiment and try new things and again, experiment in a safe place and under test conditions. Pilot safety, ground safety, safety of the operator, whoever's using the tool or the thing that we're doing is first and foremost, but then how do we play and experiment in a safe way and then really just to learn, do that experiential learning so that we can take that feedback either back to developers, designers, engineers, or out to the field and to the operator for whatever tool we may be talking about.
No, absolutely. And it's encouraging to see someone like Google X do that successfully. And there's a lot of things that we can, and I think are learning from organizations like that to get better products to the warfighter in a way that is timely, accurate, and operationally relevant.
I think one last thing, so we don't have a ton of time today, and we could talk about this trip, I think, for 3 or 4 more episodes, and we probably will. We saw it both at Google X and we saw it at BM&T, so I wanted to bring it up. Both companies talked about their funnel, and really it's a problem-solving funnel, starting with this very wide-mouth funnel of ideas. Even ideas for a problem. So I have a problem, and I think I've got a good problem statement down. I start reaching out for possible solutions, and we might have 100 or 1,000 solutions. There's no way you, me, anybody on this base could test 1,000 solutions. And so we have to start whittling it down. So as we get down to some discovery phases of a few of them, and then we move down to discovery, to some iterations, to some pilot programs, we might go from 1,000 down to 5 pilot programs. And so there's some people who look at that as, well, we failed 995 times. And we didn't. It just might not be the right solution for us based on the tech, based on the money. We can't spend $1 million when we can do it for $1. There's no reason for that. But I wanted to get your thoughts on that funnel and how you thought that might apply with not only this wing, but just the Air Force in general.
Chief, let me apply that directly to our innovation challenge during the first half of this year. During that Idea Scale Innovation Challenge, we gathered 162 possible ideas that we could pursue from the wing. That is outstanding, and I love every single one of them. We down-selected based on an optimization algorithm to 82 that we were going to actively pursue. I don't want anyone in this wing to think that all 82 of those are going to bear fruit. It's very likely that a subset of those, but maybe a small subset, are actually going to be implemented in the way that we foresee right now. That doesn't mean that the rest of those are bad. It also doesn't mean that those 80 that we didn't even pursue beyond this point are bad. It just means that we're on this natural curve of the innovation funnel. And as we get more data, and as we roll out things to customers, and as we think about some of these problems and match them to the requirements more, we're going to realize that maybe we're headed down the wrong path. Mm-hmm. And that is completely okay and expected. And what we need to message to this wing is to not be discouraged if you were part of the 80 that initially got discarded or ended up below the cut line, or don't be dismayed if you're part of those 82 and now your idea doesn't go to market. You are all part of the innovation journey, and also all of those that commented and voted on those ideas. And we need to recognize that we're not going to bat 1,000 or even close in our ideas, but there is a natural selection that's a part of good ideas that eventually whittles them down to things that can go to market.
And we've actually seen, so there's, of those 80, some of them have already dropped off.
Exactly right.
Because the dynamics have changed. The tech wasn't where we needed it to be. It turned out maybe it was more expensive than we thought, or other barriers to entry, maybe with stakeholders or networks or hooking things up, which made those go below the cut line. Another one has now come above the cut line, that would have been a little bit easier. And so I really think out of the 80 that are left, we'll probably get 5. If we can get 5 actually executed and part of a program of record or part of this wing, I think it's a huge success, because now we still have 155 more that are ready to go. And those identified legit problems around this base. And so we can still use those in other ways, and we have those ready to go as we start finding new tech, as we start meeting new people, or we start brainstorming more. We're going to come up with ideas, and we'll slowly knock more out. Yep. And then when we do it again, some of those will reemerge, and some of them will be fixed, or just through attrition will no longer be an issue. And so it's just, I think, constantly looking at that group, constantly understanding why did we not pick, the other 70. What did we learn through that process, I think, is key. And then making us better for the next cycle that we go through it. And the faster we can increase that cycle time to where maybe if we could ever get that cycle time in a day or in a week, the amount of problems we could attack is major. And then we could start hitting those micro-level problems that people didn't think were important enough to bring up to the wing commander or to a general officer, but they want to fix. It's just, it didn't make the level. And so I think the more we do it, the more people will be comfortable with it, and the more we will be comfortable with helping push or pull these projects through that pipeline.
Yeah, a couple things on that. The first one is I've seen ideas already emerge. Mm-hmm. Some that were below the cut line, some that were above, some that were both above and below. And we recognize that these are common requirements, and we were looking at them from different perspectives. And now we've already got collaborative opportunities that are going to bear fruit or could bear fruit in the future. The second one is the time that we had Duncan with Dragoner, or having coffee and donuts out on the patio with me for those that didn't make the cut line. And even just talking to those airmen, they were excited that they were a part of the journey. Mm-hmm. They were also open to hearing from me and from others how they could start maturing and molding their below the cut line idea. So the next time we have an idea scale challenge or an opportunity to invest resources against something, they will be spending the time now maturing their idea so that maybe the next time it works for us.
No, that's awesome. Well, sir, so we've got to cut this short. We've got a lot of places. We actually have a retirement to go to here in a few minutes. So we'll schedule this again in a week or two and try to continue talking, and so we can knock out some of the other companies and our other lessons learned. But I appreciate you taking the time for coming on and hanging out with me for this podcast, and we'll do it again next time.
Chief, you're awesome. You're a great wingman, and I'll tell you, bringing this podcast here to Edwards is another step in this journey of ours, and I appreciate you being alongside of me during it.
No, thank you, sir. Having a blast.
You got it. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Got it. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
You got it. Thanks.